If you've seen any of my other videos, you might already know I'm a huge fan of the Evil Dead original trilogy. The first two movies I ever rented on a VCR were American Werewolf in London and The Evil Dead. So there's nostalgia attached to the franchise for me, and I don't think it's all that strange for us to feel protective over things we're sentimental about, right? When Fede Alvarez did his version of Evil Dead in 2013, I initially turned my nose up at it. Aesthetically speaking, it was fantastic. There was lots of blood and guts. Jane Levy did a fantastic job as the final girl, but it felt like something was off. There was a lot of spoon-feeding of information. The Deadites didn't feel like Deadites, and I suppose I was struggling with the idea Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi were no longer going to be directly involved in the production. And if you think executive producer means anything more than a paycheck, and since then, I've either matured or I've just accepted the fact that those old days are gone. I think those are the exact same fucking thing. So, when I heard Sam Raimi had supposedly hand-picked Irish screenwriter Lee Cronin for this newest iteration of Evil Dead, I thought, okay, I'd seen his feature-length debut in 2019, The Hole in the Ground, and it wasn't terrible, so I decided to give Evil Dead Rise a proper chance. And, now that I've seen it,
Johnny likes the movie now.
without giving anything away, the movie's about a guitar tech named Beth, played by Lily Sullivan, and she finds out she's pregnant, so she goes searching for guidance from her older sister, Ellie, played by Alyssa Sutherland. The sisters haven't spoken in months, and Beth finds out pretty quickly her older sister's got a lot on her plate, being a single mother of 3 kids living in an apartment building that's literally falling down around them. And just as the sisters are about to start playing Happy Families, the LA apartment is rocked by an earthquake, and a pit opens up in the underground garage, shaking loose a Necronomicon. As soon as the movie starts, you find out almost immediately Lee Cronin is the right person for this job. He uses an opening lakeside scene to tell everyone in the audience, especially doubters like myself, that he can hang with the big boys in this franchise. And he can put his own spin on it. And it's one hell of a fucking spin. One thing I will say up front, because it is important, although he did make this chapter very much his own thing, Cronin has really respected the history of this franchise in a way that does not feel like fanboy ass-kissing at all. You can really see it in his camera work and the weaponry and the dialogue and the blood. There is so much blood. And if you thought the cheese grater from the trailer looked promising, there's a whole apartment's worth of other toys to play with and no shortage of creativity in how to use them. Sullivan and Sutherland were fantastic. Now, nobody's ever going to fill Bruce Campbell's shoes as Ash Williams, and I was stuck in that mindset for a really long time, but it just doesn't work that way. Beth's character fits in perfectly in relation to her backstory and where her character ends up at the end of the third act in relation to where she started off. In 2013's Evil Dead, I thought Alvarez's Deadites were not Deadites at all. They felt more like aggro zombies, and I get it, for non-Evil Dead fans, it sounds like a ridiculous criticism, but to me, a lot of what makes Evil Dead special resides in the eyes and the dialogue of the Deadites themselves. And so Alyssa Sutherland's Ellie character does something very meaningful for me personally in this movie by bringing some character back with what the Necronomicon unleashes. And for that, I'm very grateful. If I had to pick at something, and of course I have to pick at something, I'm a wannabe movie critic, I would point to the pacing. After the opening scene, the first act doesn't do the greatest job in connecting you to the characters. And yes, I hear you, this is an Evil Dead movie, it's not an episode of Days of Our Lives. But with horror, it is undeniable, the more the audience is engaged with the characters, the more the audience feels the horror the characters are feeling. It only takes a few minutes at the start of a story to make the characters more relatable, and when you do it, it pays off every time. Another gripe I had with Rise, I felt it steered away from the lore a bit too much for a movie with Evil Dead in its title. When I reviewed 2013's Evil Dead, I complained about the exact opposite thing. I felt Alvarez was relying so heavily on the lore, it was like he was using the Necronomicon as a roadmap to follow for the whole story. Whereas with Rise, we're shown a couple of pages from the book, but everything after that's basically left unexplained, apart from the obvious physical manifestations. Now don't get me wrong, I am not saying I need everything spelled out for me. That's actually one of my pet peeves with modern screenplays. In fact, I recently gave a glowing review to another crowd splitter with The Outwaters because I loved the fact that they dropped the cast into the middle of the Mojave Desert and then said, Fuck you, audience, figure it out yourself. So obviously there's a sweet spot in the soil somewhere between these two extremes, and personally, I thought that balance was struck perfectly in 1981 with The Evil Dead, but that was a very long time ago. Once things do kick off, there's no shortage of the slapstick we've all come to love from the earlier movies. There's tons of blood, tons of guts, a real sense of unrelenting violence, and a serious lack of safe spaces. If you've seen the trailer, you know that it's heavy with the young'uns. I can confirm nobody in this movie is safe. Nobody. As for where the franchise might go next, it's difficult to predict because I'm still not 100% sure what the Necronomicon unleashed in Rise, so it's hard to say what follows naturally from here.
Or unnaturally.
That vagueness might have been intentional, it might have been the result of some slack writing. Either way, I will say this: Evil Dead Rise impressed me so much with its intensity and the camera work and the practical special effects and its score that I will be on board with them for the next chapter regardless of who's directing it. In the way of a recommendation, yes, absolutely, go see Evil Dead Rise. And if you are the way I used to be regarding my devotion to the old Evil Dead movies, I love how I say used to be like it wasn't 3 fucking weeks ago, I'd suggest maybe try and get over that. This new movie is not like the old movies, and it was never meant to be. Now apparently, Bruce Campbell has said quite recently he would reprise his role as Ash Williams if, and only if, Sam Raimi directed the movie. Now of course, for all of us, that would be incredible, but there's also a lot of incredible stuff in this new Evil Dead Rise movie, so let's not cut our noses off with cheese graters to spite our face, as they say. Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!